right, guys, here I am again. Conor McGregor is out of 303 versus Michael Chandler with an injury.
We were so close, but it seems the wait will continue. With an unfortunate accident, we lost the long-awaited main event and then the co-main in one day, leaving the fans heartbroken and the UFC looking for a replacement.
On Tuesday, I reported that the UFC was sending out feelers. They were reaching out to fighters and managers to see who could possibly be available to either replace the fight, meaning 2 new fighters, or step in.
However, this is by no means a reason to lose hope. According to the current lineup, we will get an even better showdown. And there is something good in everything bad. There are always heroes who are ready to save the day. President White reached out to check Samurai.
Jiri Prochazka! There it is! Jiri Prochazka! Baby!
And Brazilian tribal chief
Alex Pereira!
And luckily for us, they answered the last-minute call. And then, after conquering the kickboxing glory scene, Pereira ventured into the world of MMA and took it by storm.
For Pereira, I mean, that was what a Cinderella story. I mean, that guy came from kickboxing, was the only two-division he was holding 2 division champion simultaneously, and was knocking people into another dimension in kickboxing. You watch his highlight reel, it's fucking sensational.
Alex was only a few fights before the UFC, where in his debut, Poatan presented himself in a phenomenal kickboxing style, taking the opponent's soul with a flying knee. No one could have dreamed how successful 2022 would be for the indigenous Brazilian. First, Alex went through a 3-round war with compatriot Bruno Silva, testing himself and for the first time ever going to a judge's decision, but still getting the victory. And then he went through the now former middleweight champion Sean Strickland, presenting his malicious left hook to the UFC audience.
He's a fucking badass, big fucking Brazilian, and he touches you and you go to sleep. It's the weirdest fucking thing. He just touches you and you fall asleep.
A successful year brought the final spectacle as icing on the cake. Pereira entered the arena for the 3rd time against his nemesis Israel Adesanya, but this time in a different setting. He took the war to Adesanya's kingdom, the middleweight division. The shootout lasted 5 legendary rounds with Israel's lead on the scorecards, but his triumph could not be final. Just a few minutes before the end, Alex's stone hands passed through Adesanya's defense like a predator. Pereira cornered him and finished him with a flurry of punches. In just 2 years in the UFC, Pereira became the middleweight champion by defeating his mortal enemy, breaking his dominant reign, and handing him his 3rd loss in a completely different sport.
I can beat him. I know I can beat him. You've seen I can beat him.
However, Alex's reign did not last long. Obsessed with bitter defeats, Adesanya wanted revenge and decided to come for it. Half a year later, the last stylebender marches into Miami's Kaseya Center, trying to right his wrongs. But this time, the fight lasted much shorter. In the 2nd round, Izzy played the role of the wounded mouse, which forced Alex to go on the attack and lowered the walls of his defense. It was a small misstep for a big disaster, and Pereira was knocked out for the first time in his MMA career. But his warrior mindset wasn't bothered by this loss, and his commentary was legendary. How many other times did I leave other families and teams sad? And we were laughing. Now's our time to rethink. So I'm okay with it right now. Instead of despairing, Alex decided to continue surpassing Adesanya with his achievements in just 4 months. He managed to do what Israel failed to do. He moved up to the division above and defeated Jan Blachowicz by decision to secure himself a shortcut to the light heavyweight title fight. Here, Jiri Prochazka joined Pereira's glorious story for the first time. The title is vacated by an injured Jamahal Hill, and the 2 killer strikers coincidentally appear in a replacement fight for Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic at UFC 295. That's right, UFC 303 is not the first event they saved. After an intense stare-down between the two violent maniacs, Jiri took advantage of Alex's lack of wrestling expertise to secure himself the first round. But Pereira came back in the second, using the nuclear options in his hands to rock Jiri, who went for a rescue takedown, but instead he received a few elbows and the referee waved it off.
All he needs to do is touch you, just a tip, and you're going down, baby.
Alex Pereira is the king of the impossible. He became the first man to knock out a Czech fighter in the UFC, and in just 4 months of light heavyweight, he was crowned with the title, doing what no other fighter did before him. The original king, Jamahal Hill, was ready to return at UFC 300 and try to retake his title at the legendary event. Sweet Dreams was a new big test for Poatan because, like Alex, he mostly got through UFC competition with his striking, scoring knockouts. But unfortunately for Jamahal, Pereira is not like the other fighters in the division. But as fate always intertwines events, after the quick and easy knockout over Jamahal, Alex had no idea that he would soon face his old and dangerous opponent. Just like his former and future opponent, Jiri Prochazka excelled long before he arrived in the UFC. He and Alex have many similarities, such as an unorthodox and deadly fighting style, a different kind of warrior mentality, and killer projectiles that can take out anyone who gets in his way. Former risen light heavyweight champion with as many as 30 matches to his name, Jiri Prochazka steps foot onto the UFC cage, where he quickly made a stir in the elite promotion. Although he only has 5 fights in the promotion, he has become a household name and fan favorite by getting finishes in all of his fights. Brutality is the language spoken by a man with 30 wins and 29 finishes. He made his phenomenal debut against Volkan Ozdemir in 2020. Jiri lived up to his hype, and the knockout was so brutal that Volkan could not even stand up during the winner announcement. Already after the first victory, Prochazka knew what his goal was. A year later, the bonus machine and opposition knockout specialist returned to the infamous cage against former title challenger Dominic Reyes. But the Czech bombs were too much to overcome for once dominant Reyes. It was another brutal knockout for Prochazka, this time in the form of a spinning elbow, due to which Dominic had to take a year and a half out of the arena to recover his brain. Jiri brought terror with every performance under the lights of the UFC, and nothing would stand between him and the title. Jiri was away for a year for the second time, and the fans couldn't wait for his return. But warriors aren't made to be out of the arena for that long, and Prochazka felt obliged to give the audience what he was made for. This story becomes more interesting because he gets a chance for a title fight against Alex's mentor and best friend, Glover Teixeira. After 5 rounds of war that enchanted the audience, the old and experienced Glover was finished in the 5th round by submission in a fight he should have won. But Teixeira could not hold out until the last bell, and Jiri in the end was too much to handle.
He's an avalanche, man. He's an avalanche going downhill, and there is nothing that is going to stop him unless you can knock him out. And I don't know who can do that outside of maybe the champion, Jan Blachowicz.
But one man appeared and showed that Jiri is very much possible to knock out. However, 12 days later, due to an unfortunate set of circumstances, Prochazka was the one who vacated the title due to an injury. In the meantime, Jamahal Hill defeated Glover Teixeira and became the champion, but he also got injured and vacated the title. The belt seemed to be cursed since the departure of John Jones from the division, being passed around too often. As mentioned, Prochazka and his return suffered the defeat against Pereira, but this is where things took an entertaining turn. 2 old rivals appear at the anniversary UFC 300 event. In the last fight in the prelims and before Poatan separated Jamahal out of consciousness, Prochazka had his comeback moment, and what a comeback it was.
UFC 300, number 2 ranked Jiri Prochazka versus number 5 ranked Alexander Rakic.
Young and hungry, Rakic returns after 2 years of rehabilitation from injury with an incredible desire to fight. This is evident by the way he threw full power shots from the start, shots that mostly landed on Prochazka's head. Ravenous for a knockout finish, Alexander tried to kill Jiri, who, on the other hand, set himself the task of showing his dominance by absorbing all the hits.
They're fighting, but not everybody's willing to just take punches, willing to just throw caution to the wind with technique. He's not just throwing anything.
Rakic indeed made the mistake of calling the Czech a fake samurai. Prochazka, even though respectful, had to bring punishment upon the Serbian fighter. Jiri took the abuse, weathered the storm, and beat him down in the second round. It was a legendary return on the legendary event, which put him back in the title picture.
And no matter who will win tonight in the main event, I want to face the champion.
And this is how it came to be. With McGregor pulling out of the fight, prolonging the agony of both Chandler and the fans, we got a second clash between these two stories. A championship clash of different but similar forces. With a total of 40 victories and 34 annihilated opponents, statistics say the fight won't last long, but the willingness of both tells us otherwise. Will the Prochazka warrior cook it according to the same recipe, or will the katana of a bloodthirsty samurai deliver the final and vengeful blow? It all goes down on June 29th.